Well, hello, and welcome to After the Breach podcast. This is episode 20, and we're diving into a year-end recap with Monika, who's joined us before from Orca Behavior Institute. And we're going to go a little unhinged today. We're alive and unhinged at the end of our season, aren't we? Aren't we, guys?
We are.
Yeah.
Ahoy.
Ahoy. But yeah, we're just going to kind of recap the year with all of the different whale sightings. And, you know, even though it's now mid-November and almost late November, let's start it off with the news of a superpod.
Yeah. Today of all days, there were a couple things I was going to come in and talk about that we hadn't seen this year, and one of them was a superpod, and can't say that anymore. So it's our first actual true superpod, the entire southern resident community. We know that they're all getting together in the summer out west in the Strait of Juan de Fuca and Swiftsure Bank, but this is our first one in inland waters. Came in, of course, went past us on San Juan Island in Harrow Strait overnight.
Of course.
We didn't get to see them, but up through the Canadian Gulf Islands into the Strait of Georgia this morning.
And they still going north.
Yeah, and they got up to like Enterprise Reef, which is kind of outside Active Pass for those not familiar, and did a little split.
Yeah, so J's and K's were in the lead with the L12s, and they took Active Pass, which was the most common route. But the greater L4s and the L54s took Trincomalee Channel. So they went up and then through Porlier Pass into Strait of Georgia.
Okay, so they did go through Porlier.
They did.
All right,
oh, very cool. So when we talk about Active Pass, probably almost every episode, because there's always incredible sightings.
It's an active pass.
It is. And we really should, in the show notes, post like a map of where that is, but if
I
you
think
are,
that can be arranged.
Yeah, we can do it. And if you are following along at home and you want to see where it is, you can go to this. There's a cool internet tool called Google. And
okay, Jeff, alive and unhinged.
Alive
for
and
sure.
Unhinged. Well, we kind of dove into this episode because we were talking before we started recording. We just started talking about the superpod today, and then it's like, hey, why aren't we just talking on the podcast like now? And so this is a long-winded way of, come on, man, I'm tired. Long-winded way of, so Monika, you just mentioned first superpod in the inland waters this year. And we, like you said, we know they go on the outer coast.
And probably in the Strait of Juan de Fuca out on the western end too. So it depends where you define inland waters, but certainly the first one that's come in as far as Harrow Strait.
Right. So it's not like, oh, they never get together and they never have these superpods. But what really strikes me about this, and I've talked about this before with being newer here and not being around in the heyday of the southern resident visits in the summer. First superpod of the year in November used to be like by mid to late May, from what I've heard.
Not always. J's and K's would usually come in by May. L's were always a little late to the party. So sometimes it would be into June or something like that. Occasionally July for all of them, true superpod. But I mean, they put the event superpod in July because that was sort of like the money time to see a superpod, right? Like the human superpod week.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But new superpod week is in November because exactly this week last year, we had a superpod go north into the Strait of Georgia.
Incredible. And probably would have been rare 10, 15 years ago to have a superpod in November. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Or at least our first superpod,
well, sure.
of the year
that
in
was,
November.
That was my next question, was going to be like, how many, just roughly, like back 15 plus years ago, how many superpods would be witnessed in the inland waters over the course of a year?
Oh, I don't.
It's tough. I mean, if they stay together for days, is that one superpod?
Right.
But certainly having a superpod occur in June and July was the norm.
Right. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to Monika. If you guys are curious about learning more about the history of these whales, about like places that they visit and that kind of thing, she wrote an amazing book, Endangered Orcas, all about the southern resident killer whales. There's a lot of great stories in there. Monika, they can get it online. Is that right?
Yep, pretty much wherever
Anywhere.
books are sold. Yeah.
Endangered Orcas by Monika. So look it up, get it. Perfect Christmas gift, holiday gift.
It just
for
says
the
by
whale
Monika
lover.
too. It doesn't say
Sorry.
anything else.
So very cool that, and they had a cool split and then got back together.
I'm guessing so. Yeah.
And so seems like they're going to head back up towards Campbell River. And was it J's and K's that were up there last week?
Yeah, it was never 100% confirmed, but was likely them. There was a big group of spread out whales up there. They were certainly up there in the northern Strait of Georgia somewhere. So,
Yeah, because we saw photos. Like we had photos of 2 K-pod whales, right? Wasn't that from that encounter?
oh, right, up at Powell River, yeah.
So I thought they were still up there, and then they were coming inbound yesterday.
Well, that's the thing is, when did they sneak by?
Yeah.
I'm guessing they came down Rosario because we've got hydrophones now in Harrow and San Juan Channel, and it may have just been the day before yesterday
Right.
that J's and K's snuck down Rosario overnight, and they all met up out west.
Yeah, really, really cool how they can move by without us knowing and then disappear west or disappear up north. And then in the past few years, I mean, we've been seeing them more or have been aware of their presence more in the inland waters over the wintertime than in spring and summer.
Yeah, so you guys know I love the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
let's talk about the numbers.
So April to September used to be what we would say the peak season was for southern residents here. And they used to average, 10, 20 years ago, over that time span, they would be here about 130 days during those months. And in the last 5 years, that average has fallen to just 52 days
Wow.
between April and September. And so the old pattern has completely flipped, where we now have them here more from October to March than we do April to September.
Wow.
Fascinating. Things hit me right off the bat from that is, first thing is the number of people that say, well, how come they can't adapt and eat something else? And this is clearly the way they're choosing to adapt, which is wonderful. If you think about how long adaptation can take, and within a generation, they've completely flipped their old patterns and have thrown them out, which I think tells you how smart they are. And then the other thing that hits me is that the policy side of things and the recovery efforts and on both sides of the border, all the policymakers and everybody is still talking about and spending their budgets on April through September.
Yep.
On the west side of San Juan Island, like in the same places too.
It's amazing how long it's taken or if it, we may not even still be there, that fact that this trend has changed to get out there and be sort of common knowledge, because you're right. People still think the southern residents are around the San Juan Islands on almost a daily basis in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make sense to put protections into place, especially if they're geographic protections in places where the whales are not currently spending their time.
And I think too, this also creates the confusion, people watching from shore during the spring, summer, fall months, when we're with killer whales almost every single day. And it's every single day it's with Biggs, but they're assuming they're southern residents because they don't.
That's how it used to be.
It's how it used to be.
There's confusion even in how the media portrays it, because on one hand, we're talking about this endangered population that's failing to recover. And then on the other hand, we're getting stories about record numbers of killer whales in the area, which both are true. But there's the nuance behind that of the two different populations here that gets lost a lot of time, especially in the popular media. And I think people are confused about
absolutely.
Who's here, how are they doing, what's really going on with both these populations.
So you mentioned this kind of new normal, or this new peak season for southern residents, and said that they are here more now October to March versus April to September. My question is, are they here more October through March than they were historically? Or are they here now more October to March because they are not here as much? Does that make sense?
Gotcha. No, I know exactly what
You're
you're
getting
asking.
all granular with this. I like it.
Yeah.
No, that's a fantastic question. So two things are happening. One is October to December, all three pods typically go down into Puget Sound where they're feeding on chum salmon. And that has been the case since around 2000 or so. And that continues to be the case in general, slightly at above numbers of 20 years ago. So they've actually increased the time that they're spending in Puget Sound in the fall. And not surprisingly, the chum Puget Sound fall runs are very strong. So they've responded to that.
And Puget Sound, I think there are some people that are still confused that think Puget Sound is just all the inland waters, but we're just talking about Puget Sound down by Seattle, south of
Whidbey Island and south.
Yeah, Whidbey Island and south into south of the Strait of Juan de Fuca.
The second thing that's going on is January to March, jays are almost here consistently. They're not leaving inland waters, and they're spending a lot of that time in the Strait of Georgia. I suspect that's been the case for quite a while, but we don't get a lot of reports of them up there.
Right.
There's a lot of water. Sea conditions aren't great that time of year. Daylight's limited. There's just not a lot of eyes.
Not a lot of people up there.
Yeah. But now that we're tracking them to the level that we've started a new metric of speculated days of southern resident presence, because we know if jays go up into the Strait of Georgia on a Monday and come back down on a Thursday, that they were here in the Salish Sea Tuesday and Wednesday, even though we didn't get a report of them. And by using that method, we had them here almost every day from mid-January through March. So by tracking it in that way, the numbers are going up for that time of year, although I suspect that for J-Pod, the Strait of Georgia has long been where they've spent those months.
Very interesting. Okay, thanks.
My big takeaway from this, I like to be optimistic, and I'm going to take this as an encouraging sign in their adapting to their new normal and finding other places to go, and maybe some other types of fish in some places, and that I'm going to take the optimistic route that this is a good thing that we're not seeing them during the times where we used to see them a lot, because we know during those times, we know from the Albion test fishery and other data, we know that what they used to eat here during those peak times, that Chinook salmon is not here. I do hear anecdotal stuff from fishermen that say, it's a great salmon here, but we know that whatever numbers of salmon are coming in Chinook, we know the size of those fish is drastically smaller than what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this year was an interesting data point because the Chinook Fraser River numbers have really crashed over the last 15 years, and that's what's led the southern residents to kind of abandon what was their core summer habitat. But this year was a little bit of an uptick again on the Fraser, at least relative to the last 5 years. So still much lower than historic averages, but better than we've seen in recent years. And it wasn't enough to bring the southern residents back into inland waters in the summer, which is sad on one hand because we don't get to see them. But I actually took it as a good sign that they found something else good enough that it was worth staying out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I agree. I absolutely, because 5 years ago, you wouldn't see any kind of uptick and they'd still come in.
Yeah.
And
it's like,
what are they
circuit,
doing?
Right.
And it's like, what are they doing here? There's like nothing. There are no Chinook running on the Fraser. What are they doing here? I'm with you. I think that's an encouraging thing.
And I think it's really important to have hope, right? To have this like optimistic look and being real about it too. Like we need to be real about what's happening so we can, work to improve things. But it's important to not like lose sight of what could be, to have that hope that if we do the hard work, if we put it in, that it could recover. Otherwise, what are we fighting for?
Yep, exactly. And another, spark of hope from the southern residents this year was 2 new calves in L-pod, in the L12 subgroup, L126 and L127. So fun when there's 2 calves in the same group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to see them a couple times this summer, and just little balls of energy and chasing each other around like crazy. And how can you not have hope watching that?
Yep. Yeah, and keep it up, L12 subgroup. Having 2 new calves, like they're carrying it now.
They really are carrying L-pod. They're I think the only females in L-pod that are producing calves
Yeah.
all at the rate we would expect, right?
Right.
From what I have read, L-pod really it controls the trajectory of the entire population of southern residents. That, jays are not, I wouldn't say static, but they're
Yeah,
there's
they're actually a little above what they were.
what they were,
Yeah.
and Ks are where Ks are, and it's the swings. It's the swings up and down in L-pod that really drive the total number of the population. I mean, they do have the largest of the three, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and they've experienced the biggest decline.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be 50 whales in L-pod, and now it's 33 or something like that. So, yeah.
When was it that they had 50?
Well, I just have that number in my mind because when they did the original naming contest for L-pod in the 1980s, there were 50 at that point in time, and that was post capture.
So we kind of started this backwards by just kind of jumping into latest sightings, starting today, right? Mixing with some southern resident numbers. Let's talk about some Bigg's numbers. And we had one awesome latest sighting where Sara, Monika, and I, and Alex and April were out on the water. And we didn't have a trip, but we went out and saw an awesome 3 families of Bigg's killer whales on a stellar sea lion hunt.
Well, not to get people excited about that and then go back to the numbers, but let's finish up with the Bigg's numbers before we get into that.
Yes. All right. Unhinged.
Unhinged.
I'm just so excited for all of this. And
it was an amazing experience. I just don't think I'm going to be able to talk about it and then go back to the numbers.
Yeah. Hey, I am not married to any numbers here, or any order here. I just I like that we're doing this unplanned and just
off the cuff.
So I just throwing stuff out there in whatever order you guys want to talk about it.
About ready to walk out of here.
No, I'm just sad that you couldn't go from an exciting encounter back to numbers. That makes me sad because I get equally excited about both.
No, numbers are great.
I get very excited about the Bigg's numbers because every year it's like, okay, well,
how high can they go?
Yeah.
Right. It can't get more, we can't get more than this, and every year we do.
So you're doing, your year-end recap, and really the Bigg's year has not ended by any means. So through October, we have already beaten last year's record number of sightings for Bigg's killer whales. And to put this in perspective, 2017 was a huge jump in sightings, and we consider a sighting a unique group on a unique day. So not just number of days present, because they've maxed those out a long time ago,
right,
but number of different groups that are utilizing the area. And in 2017, which was a big jump, it was 600 something, just under 700. And it was like, surely this is the top.
Right.
And 2022 was almost double that.
Wow.
Right? We had 1,220 unique sightings in 2022 throughout the entire Salish Sea. And through October of this year, we were at 1,270. Wow. So, yeah, every year I'm asking myself, how high can they go?
Yeah,
clearly, I think they still have runway ahead of them. I mean, they're certainly not exhausting their food supply here.
Well, and 109A2s are helping the numbers by staying down in the sound for 7 weeks now.
Yeah, so we do have some groups spending a lot more time here than they used to, weeks or even months, like you said. We're on a pretty incredible consecutive day streak of confirmed sightings.
I was going to ask, have we had any days with no confirmed sightings of Bigg's this year?
The last one was March 11th.
Wow.
So we're over 250 days straight. And really, I think they're here 365 days a year.
Sure.
We lose the streak in the winter with weather and all that. But I think this will be our record confirmed streak. And that's both because they're here so much more, but we have such a, incredible community of people out there reporting sightings and taking high quality photos and stuff that allows us to confirm these kind of numbers. But over 250 days straight, over 1,270 sightings. It's incredible to follow.
Let's go for 365 days.
I like it. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing to me. I mean, I always think back to this. So I came back out here in 2015 was my first season. And when I was thinking about making this change and buying into Maya's legacy whale watching and moving my life out here, if you had told me in 2014 when I was thinking about this, that in 2023 for that season, the southern residents would barely be here between March and September. Few days they are, you're not going to be able to view them inside 1,000 yards. I would have been like, there's no way that I'm doing this. Like, there's going to be no whale watching. And then the fact that we see killer whales almost every single day on our trips. Not every day. I mean, you know, there are days when they're in the Salish Sea, but they're not in anywhere close to the range of the San Juan Islands. But we do see them most days. And it's just shocking what has the evolution of this ecosystem in such a short period of time.
Yeah, the Orca Behavior Institute, our first year was 2015. And during our first field season, we had 3 big killer whale encounters.
Wow.
3. Mm-hmm. And we're closing in on 150 for this year. And some of that is we've grown and we have more people out there. But still, same thing. If you had asked me in 2015, I wouldn't have believed it, what we're looking at today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think like in 2012, I might have had 2 Biggs encounters. And I mean, I wasn't out here as much as I am now, but, you know, I think I had the T30s in Griffin Bay and then the T60s that fall.
And you have a lot of folks that are even newer to the area, right, than you, Jeff.
Yeah.
And
they only know the Biggs.
This is the normal. And we're talking just in 10 years or less than 10 years, this kind of change. It still blows my mind.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously part of it is over the last 10 years, their population has exploded. But part of it too, I think, has to be not the return, because their food has been back here in numbers for a while, but I think their recognition and learning and sharing the news that, hey, the food's back down there.
So one place they still have runway in front of them in terms of the numbers is the number of whales from the population that are utilizing the Salish Sea. Typically, over the last few years, we've had between 220 and 250 unique Biggs killer whales that make an appearance in the Salish Sea. There's about 370 Biggs in the intercoastal population. So there's still some other whales that aren't here, right? Aren't utilizing this area. And, I personally have met several new family groups just this year. So I think there are continuing to be more coming in, but I'm always surprised when I see that number and I'm like, there's really more than 100 that we basically never get in the Salish Sea, but that's still the case. So there's still room for growth for them there.
Curious, any that are on that list that like are bucket list for you? Like, oh man, I hope they start using the Salish Sea.
You know who I was just thinking of earlier, like right before this episode, was like, because we were talking about the T68 season. T68 C1 was last seen with T68 and T68A. And I was like, I have never seen those two, and I really want to see them.
You know what I really want to have happen is a whale in the Biggs population that we have presumed deceased to come back
show up
after a really long absence.
Yeah.
Like I want like T20 and T21 to come back or something crazy. Like that's what I want to witness that.
Well,
like a long
didn't
absence.
something like that happen up north? Didn't somebody just like resurface that hadn't been seen in a while and was people thought was gone?
T10. So she had been seen every year for 40 years and then was not seen last year and then was seen again this year. But come on, 1 year absence. I want
13 years.
like a 13-year absence like happened with the T46s. Yeah, that's sort of my bucket list because really I want to meet all of them. So all the ones I haven't met are on my one more number for you. So I said we're usually, between 220, 250 individual Biggs in the area. And through October, we're already at 249. So higher than average. And I was thinking who could still be added to that list because we have a couple family groups that usually come in November, December and only. And I was going to say, you know what? I bet we get the T252s.
And look who
and
showed up today.
Yep. So that was the second thing I was going to bring up that then happened today. So they will be added to the total, pushing us over 250.
Nice.
But yeah, they seem to be November, December Strait of Juan de Fuca whales. T252.
Nice. And I think we saw them. Didn't we see them last year? You were out with us.
No, we thought it was going to be them, but it was the T123s.
Oh,
So
that's right. That's
same,
right.
I remember
same
that
group
trip.
composition:
Yeah.
4 whales, 1 male.
Yeah.
That's when they were porpoising in.
Yes.
From
Yeah,
out
at Race
west,
Rocks.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. That was a cool trip.
But Sarah, you've probably met the 252s.
I think so. I have to look. They might have been the ones with.
I'm shocked that you don't know. You know every whale I've ever seen and when.
I think they
and
were.
Where.
I think they were the California Ts that were with the 35As and the 38As on the day of the stellar sea lion hunt. We talked about this recently on an episode where I wasn't feeling well on the first trip. You were
Yes.
like, "You have to stay out.
Yes.
Look where they are," and I stayed, and then they killed a stellar sea lion. I
Yes.
think that was them.
It may have been. I see.
They
This
were-
is where I rely on you for this.
They were
info. Don't
definitely
look at
some
me.
of the California Ts. I have to look up and see. There are usual California T suspects up here.
Yeah, so they're one of the bigs that have multiple alphanumeric designations. So
Right.
they previously were known by their CA numbers primarily, but because they've been seen up here regularly enough, they've been given a high T number, 252.
High T.
I want to see all the
like
high
it.
Ts.
On all the high T's.
The
Yeah.
back of the book, Biggs.
The not in the book bigs.
The not in the book.
Not
Biggs.
in the book bigs would be cool. Or, yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, that's all my numbers.
Okay, well those are all. I
If
mean,
you
they're-
think of any more,
it's
I like whale numbers. It's just regular numbers that
who
make me
doesn't
die
like
inside.
whale? Who doesn't like whale numbers? But I think the overall numbers from both Biggs and Southern Residents, I think there's a lot of encouragement in both. I think with Southern Residents, they've clearly changed their pattern, and what we wouldn't want is for them to keep their old pattern because it wasn't leading them to a good result. And then the Biggs pattern is just, more, and who doesn't like more whales?
Yeah, the Southern Residents, with the 2 calves and then the 1 presumed loss of K34 that will likely be confirmed in January. This is the first uptick in their population since 2015.
Wow.
So, yeah, hopeful sign.
We should talk a little bit about, speaking of all these Biggs, and we talked about a couple stellar sea lion hunts. Sarah's
Mouthing.
Sarah's mouthing to me like and
Sorry.
just say it.
Are you going to mention the minke hunt?
Well, let's talk about that first because it did happen first.
And none of us were
and
there.
none of us were there.
But the same whales actually involved in both these instances, in
Yes.
part.
Yeah.
So we had an episode, one of our earlier episodes, where we talked about a minke hunt, and
We've talked about minke hunts in a couple episodes.
we have.
You and April saw a minke predation
We saw
last year.
Last year, and I think it was October 20th, and it was the 65As and 99s.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only minke hunt I've ever seen, a successful minke hunt. But
Right.
we've mentioned them on this episode where we've seen them and they weren't successful, or they were successful and we didn't see the actual takedown.
Right.
So
And-
you know who we see, I feel like, at least pursue a minke every year?
The
The
T18.
T18s, yeah.
Yes.
And they were the ones, I think, probably that got it. Like,
Did
it sounds
most of the
like.
work.
Yeah.
So
We talked about this on one of the previous episodes of T18 was leading the charge on a minke a few years ago that they didn't get, but I bet she was leading this one.
So for this recent minke hunt, the T49As and T68Cs had been spotted and were going up Harrow and started porpoising north. And their target was the T18s, who were north of Turn Point and had a minke. And the minke was not deceased yet, but was in clear distress, as I heard it from those who
Yeah,
saw.
it sounded pretty brutal.
And then now that they were reinforced by the other whales coming on scene, they finished it about 20 minutes after that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a minke that was known in the local population, but had been not looking so well this
Yeah.
year, spending a lot of time logging at the surface, that sort of thing. But man, minke hunts used to be quite rare here.
Mhm.
And now if we have one a year,
Back-to-back years.
that could be the end of the Salish Sea minkies in a decade.
That's crazy. It's amazing to me to hear that it took them 20 minutes once the rest of the Biggs got there.
Well, it was already
immobilized. I think
Right.
sounds like.
And I'm glad I wasn't there because it sounded brutal, and I don't like to watch stuff like that. I'm just surprised because the minke hunt that we witnessed was very quick, and it wasn't brutal. I mean, the hunt
it wasn't
that we watched,
visibly brutal.
It wasn't visibly brutal. Yes.
Well,
I mean, we saw the two mom killer whales were clamped on with their teeth and just dead weight, and they drowned.
That doesn't sound brutal at all.
Yeah, that's not brutal at all. But
I think a quick death is is less brutal than
quick drowning death.
Well, I don't know.
Very different to what I heard from the other one.
So we had passengers on that trip, and they were aware of what was going on, and they were all fascinated and realized that they were witnessing real wild nature. If we had passengers at this one, I think people would have been asking us to leave. I heard this was more bloody and
but it got even more interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
After they took the minke down, a humpback whale came in.
Nike.
So humpbacks have this reputation of sort of interfering with killer whale hunts, even when they're not on other humpbacks. And so that was probably what Nike was hoping to do, even though it was too late in this case, but just disrupting the Biggs in action. And
it's so fascinating.
It's a behavior that's seen from humpbacks all over the world, I guess.
Yeah.
Crashing the meal.
Yeah. And we don't really know if it's, actual altruism or misplaced altruism or just posturing.
Right.
Saying, hey, we're here, we're watching you, we're big, we're tough,
We've got our eyes on
leave
you.
us alone.
And we've talked about that on other episodes. And somebody emailed us and mentioned that hippos do this as well.
They interrupt killer whale hunts?
How cool would that be? If we could see that on the water, that would be.
I think that's a t-shirt idea.
Oh gosh. What do hippos interfere with?
I think it was against crocodiles. I think was what it was, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But it was a fascinating email to read and kind of thinking about that. And we've seen it. Like we've seen them humpback whales like come in from afar. When Biggs were hunting seals, I've had that up at Orca Island in 2014 when I was down in Monterey Bay and had a gray whale calf predation. Same thing. The humpback whales came right in. And we're there like as long as the killer whales were feeding, they were there. Like
I recapped this most recent hunt on our social media, and somebody commented and said, "We don't deserve humpbacks."
It's true. It's true.
It's true.
All right, so that was a few days before we saw them.
Yeah, so the day kind of started with the 49As and the 68 Cs again, but coming up San Juan Channel. And Jeff, you were the first one to kind of pick them up.
Yeah, so I was taking one of our boats around to the other side of the island for some scheduled maintenance and saw the shore reports that came that you had let me know about. You had posted them on the app that they were seen from the ferry, and I think somebody else saw them from shore. So, yeah, I picked them up coming up San Juan Channel and then told you to go start looking from shore.
A little early? Is that what I heard?
You did tell me to hurry when they were.
Well, yeah, because you said
still
it
4
was
miles away.
It was. I had to leave, and I was hoping that you would get visual, but it was cold. Yeah, it was cold. You're like, I don't want to go out too early. It was freezing out there, and
the day only got colder from there.
From there, and once I found them, they were much further along than I thought they were going to be, which is why I also texted you like, go now. They must have slowed down at some point. But then I
although when I asked you how fast they were going, you know what you told me?
3 knots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think they slowed down.
It was early and it was before coffee.
That's always your excuse.
It is.
But while they were making their way up San Juan Channel, we also got a report of the T-123s that were inter-island, making their way west through Caillou Channel. So there was another group in the area.
Yeah.
And the 49As and 68Cs passed me. I was viewing from shore on the northern part of San Juan Channel, and they went into Spiden Channel. And then as soon as they were kind of around the corner, turned around and you could see the blows from the 123s back down south in San Juan Channel. So
very cool. Well, and then we decided to just take one of our other boats and crew and you, Monica, and they're so close. Let's go out for an hour.
The only time I've ever needed to convince Monica to come to the boat.
Thank goodness you did. They really, they didn't get too far, right? Shortly before we got there, they stalled out in San Juan Channel, or Spiden Channel, sorry.
And went after a sea lion. A big
stellar
sea lion.
Yeah, he was pretty big.
So we got there. The hunt was
already on.
With just the 49As and 68 Cs.
Yeah. Like one of the most fascinating things for me, and we haven't talked about this offline at all, but it looked like a pretty typical stellar hunt. A lot of, acrobatics and aerials and splashing, and then some whales would take a little bit of a break and kind of go and do a big circle, and then they'd come back in. And then we could see in the distance, we could see the blows of the 123s coming in. And as the 123s got close in their approach, all the whales went down.
And before this, the sea lion was still looking pretty vigorous.
He was very vigorous.
Yes, exactly. So you know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Was the sea lion was still very much alive, and it looked like this is gonna could go on for another hour. I think we talked to Mallard and said they saw a sea lion hunt recently that was 4 hours, and these things typically can go 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half.
Yeah, we've had them go like 3 or 4 hours before. I mean, we had to leave.
Yeah, and so this looked like it was pretty early in. The 68Cs and the 49As all go on a dive and the 123s were on a dive as they were coming into the scene.
And it ended up being a long
dive. That had to be a 7-8 minute dive. They were down for a long time. We didn't know exactly where they were going to come back up, and we're like, where's the sea lion? Because he had been at the surface getting as many breaths as he could, and as soon as the whales went down, the sea lion was gone, and we never saw the sea lion again.
No, they started eating right
off the bat, and I mean,
T123 came in, and she was like, "Let's get this done.
Get it done." And then every frickin' bird in a 10-mile radius came in to get,
including some eagles.
Yeah.
But they're, all the whales had kind of come in towards the sea lion. We saw T49A1 take some lunges at it. So they were all participating, but it seemed like there's a lot of juveniles between the 49As and 68Cs. And it seemed like it was mostly the juveniles. But like you said, when 123s came in, I feel like 123 being who she is, I was just like, oh, we're not dragging this one out. Like it's lunchtime.
It's time to eat.
So what, when you say that, like, because of who she, like, what are you talk to me about that? That's curious.
A couple things about her come to mind. One is she's a very large for a female. She's she's longer than some of the adult male Bigg's killer whales.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
over 24 feet long, I think.
Wow.
Between 23 and 24, I think.
Okay.
But the largest female killer whale that has been measured in these waters probably by a couple feet, maybe.
Right.
So she's a force to be reckoned with. And Sarah, maybe you can speak to this. I just get the impression that maybe she doesn't get along with everybody.
Yeah.
Like the T49As get along with everyone.
They're everybody's pal.
Everybody hangs out with the 49As, but not everybody hangs out with the 123s.
Yeah, I would go so far to say not everyone hangs out with the 123s, and there have been instances when we've had like groups of Biggs socializing together, and then T123 and her family come in, and then all of a sudden like the whales are porpoising in different directions.
That's funny.
But we had the T75Bs. I think the T60s were in there. There were other families. T36Bs, I think. I don't know. There were a lot, like 4 or 5 different families. 65Bs, maybe. And T123 came in, like, with her family. To all these whales, just, like, socializing, spy hopping all together, rolling around. And then, like, they all went on a dive. She came in. They went on this kind of, like, long dive as they all came together. And within 2 minutes, the 60s and another group, maybe it was the 75Bs, were hightailing it out
Wow.
of there, like porpoising out of there. And T123 and T123D were porpoising after, like dolphin leaping, chasing them for half a mile before they stopped, turned around, and went back to the others and started socializing with the other group.
Wow. Okay.
So I don't know how to interpret that. Maybe it was just fun, but it sure seemed like, get the heck out of here, you know, like she was chasing them. And then,
and now that I'm thinking about it, I see the 123s most often, just the 123s.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't see them with other families very much.
and if I do, it's a lot of the times with relatives, like it's with the 46s or with, 46Bs or some.
Okay, so the 123s came into the sea lion hunt and it
Finished
it was a done deal at that point. And then it was just a whole lot of prey sharing and
Socializing.
Yeah,
socializing and breaching.
Someone asked me this question. They said, how far would one sea lion go with that many whales? But, right, thinking maybe it's just a snack.
Mhm.
But Steller sea lions are big.
They're massive.
Yeah.
They get up to 2,500 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like we mentioned, it could take hours for even a group of orcas to
Sure.
take them down. To me, my impression, we ended up with what we think 14 whales there.
Mhm.
That seems like food for the day for all of them.
Potentially.
Most likely. Close to.
Well, especially after most of those whales had just had a minky in the last week.
It was like 2 days before, wasn't it?
Maybe that's what 123 was saying. Like, you guys have been feasting. Like, hand over that.
Yeah,
sea
hand
lion.
over
right?
the sea lion, right? It's like how much are you guys going to eat the Friday after Thanksgiving? Like,
You killed a minky in 20 minutes and it's taking you this long to work on a sea lion. Let's do this.
we were there for a few hours after the death of the sea lion, and it was super, super social.
Yeah.
Lots of prey sharing, lots of breaching.
And couldn't ask for a more picturesque setting, really, than
Spiden was so green.
Spiden in the fall. Beautiful green. If you've been here in the summer, it dries out and is brown, but it comes back to life this time of year with the rain.
But it was sunny, calm.
This is one of those days, especially this time of year, because it's so quiet on the water.
Mm-hmm.
The weather was beautiful. The lighting this time of year is the best lighting. Like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're getting this like
low angle, golden light.
at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just grateful that we were able to go out there and see what we saw.
Well, and we do get our winter storms that pass through, but in between them, really all winter, we get these beautiful days.
Yeah.
And the way that it is now with Bigg's, killer whales, and everything else here, I feel like some of our best wildlife days have been
Absolutely.
November to February.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, today was a great example. We didn't see killer whales today, but we saw 4 different humpbacks, 2 singles,
I found them.
and then a pair. What really stands out, like the pair that we saw in the Strait of Georgia, it was gibbous and divot, and they were traveling together, and just this incredible late afternoon lighting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with these beautiful backlit blows, glassy water, and we're the only ones there. And it's like, you're right. And you expressed that better than I've ever articulated in my own head, is that we do
Or
get
now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No. We get lots of days of big wind and rain, and we can't go out there. But in between those fronts, we get these beautiful days all winter long. And if you can time it right, it's great to come out on the water all winter long. The whales and wildlife are pretty spectacular. Any other standout moments from the sea lion hunt?
There was one. Yeah.
There was one.
Are we telling that story?
There's a lot.
Why not?
I feel like we should.
I think we should too. I mean,
We didn't, it happens. These things happen, right? There's nothing we can do to control
there
it.
was nothing we can do to control it, and nothing we could do to make it happen.
Right.
No. So we were shut down.
Yep. The whales had been pretty
'cause
far off.
So it was actually, this was a really interesting part of the encounter too, was that T49A1 for the most part. He participated in the hunt, but he did not seem to participate in the prey sharing.
Right.
I think
right.
he got the end piece and went and took it off. So,
He got the back flipper.
By choice, or was that what he was given?
I don't know, but I do want to jump onto your beginning of this, is that we were all looking at and taking videos and photos of 49A1.
Well, that's what I was going to say, was that he was coming back in and to rejoin the group. And so he had popped up closer than he had been in quite a while.
But he was still probably a little over 200 yards away from us when we all got him in that video.
Yeah, so he was heading back towards the group. So we had cameras out, filming. I was filming with my phone.
Me too.
And then out of nowhere, T68.
Aaron should turn the podcast off now.
She's already seen the video. T68 C3 dolphin leaped off the stern and created a huge splash that landed in my lap. I've gotten blow in the face before, like killer whale
exhalation. An exhalation of a whale.
Yeah. Thank you. But this was a whole other level of a whale being in the splash zone. I mean, Jeff, you saw it from a different perspective. I feel like I was just in shock seeing it. But how close to the boat was that whale?
I was standing on the bow. You were on the stern, and that it happened on the stern. I was on the bow. This is a 26, 27 foot boat, not a very big boat. So I'm up there taking video of 49A1, who's 200 yards ahead of us, kind of at our 11 o'clock, going to rejoin the group that was kind of off our 2 o'clock, that was further than 200. And yeah, we were shut down, and I saw this happen out of not the corner of my eye, more than the corner, because I did see the whole thing, but it wasn't right in front of me because it was at the back of the boat, and I wasn't. I was like, "Wow, who is 68C3? C3?" I was like, "I think 68C3 might be in Monika's lap." I mean, it was from the perspective that I was looking at it. It was like,
well, my life did flash before my eyes. It was that close.
Yeah, mine too.
And I'm not sure if we know if it's juvenile, but it was completely.
Is it? It was really big.
11 or 12.
Kidding.
So,
no, I know.
Not full size yet. No, very large animal.
That's my takeaway from that whole thing, is you realize how
killer whales are big.
They're big animals.
But completely airborne, like full body airborne on this dolphin leap.
Yeah.
And it was over in a split second. But I was drenched. My camera was drenched.
Yeah.
And none of us had any idea, like, that
it was
she
there.
wasn't.
No, she had not been.
That she wasn't
there.
with the group.
Right.
That was over 200 yards at our 2 o'clock. Like, we had no idea where she came from, and it really was like, what was that? What is she doing?
So at this point they had kind of finished prey sharing, and it seemed like they were just kind of goofing around before moving on. And so, Sarah, you and I talked about it afterwards. Like, was this intentional on her part? And it seems like it must have been.
Must have been.
Isn't pretty much everything they do intentional? I mean, how many times do we talk about how smart they are and how intelligent and how emotional? And
but I guess my question was she just leaping because they had been leaping all over the place post hunt anyway, or was this specifically targeted like towards the people on the boat?
She knew where we were. Like, we were very much a obvious non-moving target,
right? And we had been in proximity.
We
had been in proximity to them, to all these killer whales for, I think, 3.
No, it was like an hour and a half or something.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
whale time is warp time.
Well, we had to leave after this moment because
you were soaked in freezing cold.
I thought I was cold before, because it was cold out there. But when you get however many gallons that was of Salish Sea dumped on you, that's a different level of cold.
Yeah.
I had to go home and straight into a hot shower.
Yeah, I was soaked from like the knees down, but I missed the most of it.
Yeah,
it was
for
the team.
a very spectacular and fleeting moment.
But I think it was definitely intentional. And I do think, like, I've had moments where usually young whales in that age range have done things not like that, but similar in vein. And I really think, and this is totally just me going, making this anecdotal, whatever, that it was like they were trying to it was a mess around. Like, they're trying to mess with, to get a reaction,
Well, they got
one. No, I know in my video, I'm pretty sure one of us screamed very high pitched.
No, that was April.
Was that April? Okay.
I do not scream like that.
I was like, I don't usually either, but it sounded like.
Oh, maybe it was you.
No, but yeah, no, I do think it was intentional, and I don't know what that intention was, but
I think it was just
a funny, yeah.
It didn't feel vicious or
No,
anything,
no,
right?
no.
It was just like, haha.
It seemed
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed more the feel of it. If there can be a feel, to me, was more humor, and play. Definitely not like there was nothing about that was aggressive.
Almost like, and this people, I'm sure I'm going to get people like, it's not like that at all. Almost like when your dog or cat gets the zoomies and they like run up to you and they like, spin around and then they zoom off.
Or like do parkour off your legs.
Yeah, it was
wall.
almost like that. That was kind of the energy I got.
Yeah, and just, wasn't
Whale
persistent,
zoomies.
right? Didn't
just
went right back to the group. I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like just casually swam back to the rest of the group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like whale zoomies.
New term coined right here.
I like it.
On
Whale
episode
zoomies.
20.
We need to do Meet the Matroline, which is funny because we were talking about the 123s.
Well, we're all three here. We could just chat about them.
Yes, and then we do Don't Go Away. We have a couple of housekeeping promo things to talk about. Yeah, the 123s who are in on the sea lion hunt, they are the ones that came in, and she said, "Let's get this done already." Sydney,
yes,
is T123. She's born in 1986.
No.
So there you go. I'm out.
But you were close. 1985, approximately 1985.
85, 86. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And presumed
She's an 80s child.
daughter of T46.
Presumed daughter of T46, the legend, who was one of the last killer whales captured in the state of Washington in 1976, Bud Inlet. And her capture was what kind of prompted, long story short, was what outlawed the capture of orcas in Washington state. Quick recap on T46. She showed up the following year with a calf, T46A, and then disappeared for 13 years. And that was kind of where Monika and I were talking about these, like, we want a whale to come back from the dead. Yeah. 13 years later, T46, quote unquote, came back from the dead. And she had 2 juveniles with her that were given the IDs T122 and T123. Because while they were very young, they were not new enough. They had not been seen with her as newborns, so we couldn't 100% confirm they were her daughters. But T122, that you actually gave the nickname to, Sinteki, spent her, stayed with T46 until T46 passed away this year. And T123, split off when she started having her own calves. T122 has never had a successful calf.
And I know this isn't Meet the T46s, but
That's
for
okay.
those wondering, T46A did not come back with them.
Right. For a long time, I think people thought T122 was potentially T46A.
Right.
That is not the case.
Correct.
So, T123, presumed daughter of T46, still has siblings out here, T46B, T46C, and then, the younger
T46
brothers.
is proper, yeah.
Yeah. And she has had 4 offspring, 3 of which are still alive. So the big male, Stanley, Stan the man.
123A.
T123A.
Who looked like he was in a food coma after that sea lion.
I know, right?
'Cause he was
did.
just
Logging at the surface.
Yeah.
And everyone loves Stanley. Everyone that like he's one of the most loved whales out here when people.
A lot of people ask about him.
Yeah. I will also say he's a really photogenic whale. I don't know why that is, but some of my best, sharpest killer whale pictures are of Stanley.
The camera loves him.
The camera loves
The camera
Stanley.
does love Stanley.
Everybody loves Stanley.
So he was born in the year 2000. And this family, I should say, the T123s are named, I think, by Vancouver Aquarium, have naming rights on them. And so Sydney is named for Sydney, BC. Stanley, born in 2000, I'm assuming named for the Stanley Cup.
Stanley Park.
Stanley Park, okay.
I made that same mistake when I was talking
I was
about
thinking
them
like
last
maybe
week.
the Canucks won the Stanley Cup.
The Canucks have not won the Stanley Cup.
Oh, sorry.
So that's going to be a sore point for some
I'm
listeners.
sorry.
sure.
I'm sorry.
Did we just lose listeners?
You may have.
We can cut that out. They deserve to win.
But they're off to their best start ever. this
Okay,
season,
well-
so maybe this is the year.
There we go. And then Lucky, T123C, born in 2012. And Lucky got her name because there was a pretty interesting thing that happened with the T123s the year before she was born.
And we're going to put a link. There's a great YouTube video about this that we'll put a link in the show notes.
But in
Must-see video.
2011, T123, so Sydney and Stanley, stranded in Prince Rupert. And they were stranded on this mudflat. And we'll put a link, but if you type into your YouTube search, like orca crying on the beach, you're going to eventually come up with a video. And it's not the one of the orca on the rocks, like all these rocky outcropping.
You can also search on that tool I was talking to you about earlier too. Google.
Google.
I actually have not seen this video.
Oh,
it's incredible.
but it's on a mudflat, and it's teenage Stanley crying, and this woman's consoling him.
Oh.
So they stranded on this mudflat, and
Presumably they were in pursuit of prey and the tide was going out.
Yep.
And,
And just for those that are not familiar with, like our tidal swings up here, like here in the Salish Sea, like a 13-foot exchange. So still a pretty big exchange.
Much bigger up there.
As you get up into northern BC and into Alaska, you're talking like 30 plus feet. So, I mean, if you misjudge the tides, it can be.
You're
and
laying on a mud flat crying.
You're laying on a mud flat crying. Or you're
That's a t-shirt
or
right
you're
there.
stuck in Barnes Lake for 44 days.
That's a t-shirt right there.
So these two were stranded. Eventually, the tide did come back in. They did survive and swam off. And the next year, Lucky was born. And that is lucky because Sydney stranded, and whales, the way they're built, don't have internal bone structure to support their internal organs. A lot of times when they strand, they're actually suffocating because all of that weight is on their lungs and they can't breathe. So you would have thought like a fetus might have been crushed and pregnancy loss, but nope. Lucky survived, was born, is healthy. She's still around and got the name Lucky, and that's why. And then T123D.
So, T123B, you had mentioned she had 4 offspring.
Yeah. Sorry.
Maybe.
I don't even know when they passed away.
I don't know off the top of my head, but one didn't survive.
Yeah. T123B, second offspring, did not survive. I believe passed away prior to 2011.
Yeah, because it was just the two of them on the beach. Yeah.
Yep. And then in 2018, Sydney gave birth to her latest offspring, which is Darcy, named for Darcy Island. And little female, we saw her pretty soon after she was first discovered. She was little.
Darcy.
Yeah, when she was first seen.
So
and she's not little
named
anymore.
For another place in BC.
Yeah,
like I just
Darcy
said.
Island.
You're not paying attention.
You were on your phone.
Sorry.
But
I was just making sure you were paying attention.
But that was 5 years ago. T123. I think she's due for another.
yeah, she could. She's 38.
That would be cool.
You know?
That would be
She
cool.
could
for
have
another.
one more. Or, I mean, she could have as many more as she wants. But
No one's going to tell her otherwise.
no.
I was going to say, you're saying that like you're afraid of her.
I'm a little afraid of her. No, not really. She's a cool whale. And So yeah, that's the T123s, and
They're one of the matrilines that we can see here and do see here every month of the year.
yeah,
Like they're around in the winter quite a bit.
They're a really good example. Like all year, they're not here all year long, but you can see them any month.
Yeah, they're a really cool family. I've had some really amazing encounters with them. And very photogenic family. I think people like Stanley because he has the really big rostrum that kind of like overhangs his lower jaw, which is not unique to Stanley, but a lot of people are like, oh, Stanley has the overbite, like that's what they, or underbite. I don't.
He's just a charismatic.
He's a
whale.
very charismatic whale.
He is, and the camera loves him.
So that's Meet the Matriline T123 edition. If you have any questions about them, you have a matriline you're interested in hearing more about,
or you have any questions or topic suggestions, you can email us at afterthebreachpodcast@gmail.com. There's also on our website, afterthebreachpodcast.com, there is information for our photo workshop for next August.
Mm-hmm.
If you are interested in our 2025 charter to swim with the humpbacks of the Silver Bank, send us an email. We will be putting info up on the website shortly.
We're already about
we've got
halfway full.
We're almost
actually.
halfway full, which is amazing. It's a really good group of people, and that's going to be that's a once in a lifetime type of and a life changing.
Says the guy that goes every year.
Well, but it is a life changing experience.
It
we
is
talked about it.
life-changing.
I wouldn't be here doing this if I had never gone to the Silver Bank.
Yeah. And we talked about that with Gene. Like, we say it's once in a lifetime, and then you go and you're like, I can't just do this once in my lifetime.
And to me, aren't many bucket list experiences, I think, shouldn't be like, oh, it's a bucket list experience, so I'm going to check the box and be done. Yeah. It's like,
I just checked one of those. I don't need to do again.
Lap full of water.
Getting completely drenched by a wild orca. I'm glad that it happened, but I'm good.
And I don't ever need it to happen again.
I'm good.
Yeah. I think my point is there are experiences where it would be cool if I experienced that once, and then there are what a lot of people call bucket list items that I don't think are bucket list. Like, it's not a check this off. It's something that you want to do as many times as you possibly can.
Yeah, there's lots of those things, and we're going to get like philosophical here, where, it's so
philosophical, an hour and 11.
It speaks to you so much that it becomes a bucket list item. Like, this is something I need to do before the end, right? But if it's something that speaks to you that much, it's not something that you're just going to want to do once.
So do it as soon as possible.
And as many times as possible.
Many times as you can. And for many people, the Silver Bank is that kind of an experience. It's not, we go back and listen to, I think, our episode of Whales Around the World that we talked about after last winter, where, it does take a commitment, and it is not the easiest boat ride sometimes getting out there on the overnight crossing.
Episode 11.
But it is, once you're out there and you're with the whales and you see how many humpbacks are out there and what's going on, you realize it was worth the sacrifice to get out there. And Monika, thank you. It's always great having you on. I always appreciate your approach to the numbers and your thoughtfulness behind them. It's not just like throwing out random numbers of like, oh, this many sightings, but what it all means. You are the person that I would have picked to be in that seat on the boat yesterday to get that
Thank
experience.
you. I think. But always a pleasure to chat with you guys about whales, whether we're recording or not. So thanks for having me.
And my apologies to the Canucks fans out there for messing up that. But I'll be rooting for you guys this year. Obviously, I know very little about hockey. Monika is going to teach me more.
So if you have any questions about any of this, get in touch with us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends. And by all means, no matter what you do, stay safe out there. Sara?
Stay safe out there.